The second logical relationship we're going to discuss is logical implications. So the first one was logical consistency. Do two statements, are they logically consistent? Is it logically possible that both of them are true or not? Now we're talking about logical implications. When you look at two sentences, what you're trying to decide is if one sentence logically implies the other. So for example, if I said, Joe is 42 years old. That's the first sentence. Joe is 42 years old. The second sentence is, Joe is not a teenager. Now think for a minute. If you know that Joe is 42 years old, then that logically implies he's not a teenager. So if Joe is 42 years old, Joe is not a teenager. The first sentence logically implies the second sentence. By knowing the first one, you know the second one has to be true. Now here's another one that's obvious. Joe has never been to prison. Joe has never committed a crime. Does the first sentence, Joe has never been to prison, logically imply the second sentence, Joe has never committed a crime? No, it doesn't. Many of you got that immediately. Just because a person hasn't been to prison doesn't mean that they haven't committed a crime. The first sentence does not logically imply the second sentence. Joe has never been to prison, therefore Joe, what? It doesn't imply anything about whether or not he's actually committed a crime. You could say something like, Joe has never been to prison, and then the second sentence is, Joe has never been found guilty of committing a crime. Now that one is closer to the truth, but still you can be guilty of committing a crime. You can be found guilty, you can be convicted and not go to prison. And now we can make it a little cleaner and say, Joe has never been to prison. Joe has never been found guilty of a crime that is worthy of going to prison. The first statement implies the second one, right? So Joe is 42 years old. That logically implies Joe is not a teenager. But Joe has never been to prison. That doesn't logically imply Joe has never committed a crime. Think of another one. Joe believes in God. Joe is a Muslim. Joe believes in God. Joe is a Muslim. If you know the first one, does that imply the second one? No, because Joe could be Baha'i, Joe could be Jewish, Joe could be Christian, Joe could be Sikh. Joe could be a lot of things. Just because Joe believes in God doesn't mean he is a member of one of these other religions. What you could say is, Joe believes in God. Joe is a theist. A theist is just another word for God, or a believer in God. Joe believes in God. Joe is a theist. One implies the other. If you know that one of them is true, then you know that the second one is true because one logically implies the other. All of us assume that if someone's statements and beliefs violate this rule of logical implications, that they are incoherent, that they don't make sense. If a person tells you, because this person has never been to prison, therefore they've never committed a crime, you automatically know that that doesn't follow. Another one would be like, Joe has been to prison. Joe is an evil person. Does the fact that Joe has been to prison logically imply that Joe is an evil person? No, it doesn't. So the fact that many of you can pick up on this pretty quickly, that's what I'm trying to say, is that some of this stuff is just common sense. You didn't need to take a class in philosophy to learn it. But so many people don't actually have beliefs that are logically consistent and logically imply each other. And it's pointing out where certain logical beliefs imply something contradictory. That is very often what's going on in a discussion about what's true and not true, what's moral and immoral. People are trying to point out, well, you believe this one thing, that means you can't believe this other thing because the two are logically inconsistent. Or we'll say, well, you believe this one thing, therefore you must also believe this other thing because the two logically imply each other. Pointing out logical inconsistencies and pointing out logical implications are two ways that we either prove or disprove claims and ideas. That's an important takeaway from logical implications, is that if you are concerned about being a logical person, a reasonable, rational person, then you have to follow the truth wherever it goes. You have to follow the implications of certain core things that you believe or value. Another way to say it would be if you love the truth, if you're a lover of truth, if you're a lover of truth and justice, then you will follow the logic wherever it leads.